You're listening to a DM podcast.
Welcome to Over the Back Fence. I'm Di Edwards.
I'm Nicola Dale, and we're buddies of nearly 4 decades. And yes, we actually do happen to share a back fence.
We do. We love parties, people, inspirational stories, and honestly, making the most out of life.
So join us as we open our hearts, share our stories, and hear from some of the most inspirational people in the world, and have a laugh along the way.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Hi guys, this episode is brought to you by Air Women, experts in natural hormonal health for women over 40. Bear in mind it's Air spelled E-I-R.
Yeah, their products, they're designed to support energy, which we love.
We love that.
Mood, sleep,
Love that. Love
and
that.
more, helping you feel your best.
Oh, what more could you want?
We want
and
that.
honestly, we actually love them.
Absolutely
We really
love
do.
it.
And look, if you want to get a 20% discount, just use the OTBF20 at checkout for an exclusive Backfence listener discount.
eirwomen.com.au. Go get onto it.
Yahoo, and have your best life.
Hey, Didi, we are back and I'm pumped. How are you?
Oh my God, that's dangerous. I'm actually calm.
That's good.
Ethereal today.
Good yin and yang balance.
It's
I
the
think.
Sarah mode.
I think that's the thing. Remember we had Lane Beachley on, and she says before she talks or before she does any performance, she does the box breathing.
Yeah.
And it's a really good technique to do that. But I was thinking, hey, our next guest, I don't think probably needs to do any of that box breathing.
well,
or we
maybe
wouldn't.
she does.
Maybe she
There's
does.
actually a
She
chapter
would.
in my book about it.
Good.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, there you
think
go.
great
Because she just
idea.
comes across the most naturally calm, beautiful energy. And we are super delighted to have Sarah Grynberg joining us here. Sarah's a mindset coach, a keynote speaker, and the host of the bloody brilliant potty, A Life of Greatness. Got to say, I love it. And I think, Sarah, she has interviewed all the biggest names on planet Earth. I mean, some of them, from Matthew McConaughey, who I think's a spunk.
I think she interviewed God, didn't
Yeah, I
she?
think
at
she
one stage?
did. I don't know who she
Still
hasn't
waiting to
interviewed
hear
her.
back.
Yeah. Rich Roll, Esther
my
Perel. Your crush, Didi, is
My
Byron
crush,
Katie.
yeah.
You've toured with Johan Hari, bringing powerful conversations on happiness, focus and resilience. And I tell you what, this is all our jam, so we just really love that. And it's exciting because you've got a new book, which is Living a Life of Greatness. So Sarah continues to empower people to harness their own unique greatness every day. So we are
Yahoo.
thrilled to share
Welcome.
her wisdom with us.
Yeah.
So lovely to
Welcome
be
to the
here.
back fence, Sarah.
We've been
Lovely
having
to
the
be
loveliest chats prior to going to air.
We're thrilled.
You just
Honestly, I'm in love with the both of you. I've met you for like half an hour.
We've just been chatting about energy and just
Yeah.
as soon as you mentioned that word, because that's really our language, Nicola and I. I'll be honest, I've been following you for a fair while, so's Nicola,
Yeah.
and we really are fans. And, Sarah has her own podcast, and I think it's lovely where you can admire the person on the other side of the microphone rather than the actual guest. And I really, because I find you very calm. Well, Nick and
Told
I
you.
are like, yeehaw! But I thought the best way to start today would be how I admired how you listened to your calling, going from radio producer with people such as other people I admire, Hamish and Andy, to moving into the podcast world. Tell us about that story and how that all came about.
Yeah, so since the age of 4 years old, like no joke, I watched The Wizard of Oz and I was literally obsessed, and I just knew that I wanted to work in entertainment, and it took me a long time to get there. I was acting for years when I was at school, and I went on to uni to do like marketing, and I studied film and all this kind of stuff. And you know what you do as a teenager, you kind of circle around, learn other skills, but you're not quite there. But in my heart, I had this yearning of, even I'd do marketing at big corporates and we were doing these amazing TV commercials, but I felt like I'm not in on the action. I want to be closer to it. And it took years and years, and I got a job at the big radio station in Australia, and I worked within promotions and other areas, and then I wanted to do producing, and I moved into that area and started doing that, and I loved it. And as the years passed, I kept doing that, and then we got asked if we wanted to work on the breakfast radio show, which I did, and everything looked unbelievable on the outside. breakfast radio show, biggest radio show at the network, getting paid a heap of money. I thought, this is it. Like, everything I wanted has come to me. And it was no joke, probably one of the worst years of my life. I was absolutely exhausted. I had a 2 and a 4-year-old at the time. I was waking up at 3 a.m. 5 mornings a week. And it was just, the news cycle was on 24/7, because when you're a producer in a breakfast show, that is what you have to do. And so literally, I think I was watching the news about 6-7 times a day. I thought I liked it, but I was getting all this negative bombardment the whole time. And it just got to a point where I was exhausted, and I was really sick with the flu one day. I could barely move. And, you know, Eckhart Tolle calls it the dark night of the soul, as a lot of the other spiritual teachers do. And it's really interesting, you know, because the brain takes a snapshot of some of the darkest moments of your life and some of the best moments of your life. And then in between that, I can't remember much. But this moment was like I had been in it like yesterday. I can remember it so clearly, even though it was years ago. And I thought to myself, if I keep on going like this, I am just going to be a wreck. I do not want to live like this. Everything I have thought was going to be so great on the outside and look so great to everyone else was just making me so sad and so miserable. And I honestly don't know what happened in that moment, but I realised that I needed to make the change and no one else could. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I'll just start reading personal development books and listening to personal development books and really getting into the understanding of the mind-body connection, Buddhism, psychology, all the different things that interested me. I started meditation, and no joke, in a very short period of time, my life started changing. It was almost a bit creepy. But the thing is that I like to add to people.
I get it.
Yeah. It was that.
Because you're connected.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I was so unconnected. And the thing is, though, you know, people can
I
listen.
love it. Creepy, but we get it.
True. I was like, oh my
We go
God, like
kooky.
what's going on?
Yeah.
But the thing is, right, and I think people can listen to our conversation today. They can read my book or any other amazing book in the personal development realm, and they can understand it, but they don't embody it. Because I was so serious about this, I started embodying everything, right? Like full on. I was like, okay, I need to watch my thoughts. I need to stop gossiping. I need to do this. I need to do that. And I actually completely changed. And this is an interesting line.
Over what period of time?
Months. Like I reckon
Wow.
3 months or something
That's
like
profound.
that.
It
Like it was
really
3-4
is.
months. But I was so conscious of it. And really, this is a profound line, but something that people need to hear. For change to occur, you need to change. And it sounds so obvious, but we don't do it. If you want change in your life, you can't be the same person doing the same thing every day. It's not going to happen. For change to occur, you need to change your habits. And it was the first time in my life that I started changing my habits. I started watching my mind. My mind was crazy. I'd be thinking about God knows what 100 times a day. I was negative Nancy, not because of any reason, but you know, coming from a family where everyone worried, which is quite common only because everyone wants to protect one another, then I would worry about everything. And anyway, this is a long story to answer your question.
I'm actually
But basically,
loving this.
I started doing the personal development work, and then I stopped doing the breakfast radio role within that short period of time.
You canned
Did
it?
you quit?
So no,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
is really
Exactly.
interesting.
I
feel like I'm reading a book.
I
I
was
know.
very. I was too scared still to quit that job, right? And again, isn't it the universe?
Yeah.
I got this
Once
call.
you connect.
Yeah, I got this call, and it doesn't happen in the way that you think it will. I got this call from the producer saying, because we were doing a Sydney
You're
breakfast
losing
show.
it. You're gone.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
like,
yeah.
what?
yeah. We were doing a Sydney breakfast show from Melbourne. So he was coming from Sydney to Melbourne. I thought, this is weird. He's travelling all this way for a meeting just with me. This is never a good sign, right?
No.
Right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
basically what happens is he says, you need to move to Sydney next year. And I'm like, as if I'm going to move my 2 kids
Yeah.
and my husband to Sydney,
Sure.
right? As if, and
Yes,
to a
yeah.
job I hate. Or your job's redundant, right? And I'm like, shit.
Oh, okay.
You know, like
Wow.
what am I going to do? But it was weird, you know, because usually me being the worrywart would freak out.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
have an income. What am I going to do? But for some reason, I felt like I was obviously a bit shaken, but I felt all right. This bit I'm only telling you guys because I know you love personal development and you're spiritual. You can't make this shit up.
No.
I was
I love
lying
this.
in bed the next night. I remember looking up at the ceiling and just talking to myself in my head. And I didn't pray. I never prayed, really. And I remember thinking, and this is a silly thing to think, but I am telling the truth. I thought, just keep your prayers till something very serious happens, like the boy that cried wolf. Don't just
Yeah.
pray for any little
No,
thing.
yes,
You got it.
yes.
And, you know, honestly, anyone is allowed to pray for anything at any
Yes,
time.
yeah,
but that was
but-
my thinking at that time. And I remember thinking, I didn't say like, hey, God, are you there? But I was just saying, please, I really like working at the company that I work at, but I can't go on like this. I don't want to leave, but I can't work, you know, these terrible hours and have 2 little kids. And I just want to work with talent who are really nice and really appreciate me for who I am. And I'd love to, whatever I do, give back. And then I fell asleep and I didn't think anything of it. 2 weeks passed. And I get a call from the head of the radio station saying, hey, we don't want to lose you when we've heard what happened. There's a new department that's starting. It's a podcast department. And podcasting was in its infancy. So, like, I'd literally...
I've got triple goosebumps.
Wow.
I know.
I love how this
is
happens.
just-
It literally, like, I was thinking, podcasting, and I'd only listen to Serial.
What the
Do you
hell's
remember?
that?
Yeah.
And Sarah, what year are we talking?
Yeah,
We're talking because I think
good
it was
question.
2019.
Yeah,
was it when you
something
started
like that.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I was like, okay.
Oh.
And then he said, look, no one knows this yet, but Hamish and Andy are about to finish their radio and start a podcast.
Wow.
And we'd love you to be their executive producer. I mean, no one says no to that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. So no joke. They allowed me to work 4 days a week, normal hours, what I'd asked for, working with the nicest talent you've ever met and staying at the same company.
And what about City?
And I was in Melbourne.
And
nothing
in Melbourne
changed.
too.
Nothing
Yeah,
changed, yes.
nothing changed. Every single thing I had asked for was literally
All on a whim and a
given to
prayer.
me. Seriously.
How's that?
Wow.
And then I reckon 6 months in, I came up with the idea of a life of greatness because this is when I went, oh my God, this actually works.
Wow.
Well,
Listeners,
I can't
tune
believe
into
it.
that.
I can't believe it. Like, it really does. Doing the work works. I've got to teach others. And then I got my job of service.
Love that. You got to teach others.
Great intention.
Yeah. And you know, the rest, I've written a book, I'm a mindset coach. Like, you can't make this script up. But at the same time, you need to work on yourself and you need to work on yourself daily. And it's not all roses and rainbows. And I have days that are very hard. And sometimes I feel like, oh, it's such a, you know, push-pull of life. But at the same time, I don't stop for a moment working on myself. I go to bed every night. What could I have done better? I'm very conscious of everything that I'm doing and I'm saying and the way that I'm showing up in the world where I was never like that before.
But you implement it. I've met people over the years, and Nick and I have a saying, both of us.
Yeah.
We're a work in progress till we die. But I studied holistic counselling 100 years ago, but I remember meeting several people that would study and learn all these mindfulness techniques. But they wouldn't implement them into their lives. It was like more and more and more knowledge, but never actually landing it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying
100%.
about that?
And that's why I said at the start,
Yeah.
that exact thing. It happened fast for me because I was embodying it. For change to occur, you need to change. You can't just read a book and understand it to have a discussion about it, but not practice it. Right? If you're not
Correct.
practicing what you're preaching or just what you're learning, then nothing's going
Or
to
reading,
change.
reading,
Exactly.
yeah.
Sarah, what do you say? Because that was a really good
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
Di, too, because you get people there and say you had also a kind of a trigger as well with, you know, work. You had your sort of
Yes.
thoughts there. For people who mightn't have that trigger or they mightn't be aware of those triggers going, I'm reading this sort of stuff. I still haven't got it there to change or to sort of to do that. I'm kind of reading it, but I can't really implement it. Or how do they change that mindset? Is it mindset?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think one of the big things, and I have this as one of the first chapters of the book, is conscious awareness. If we're not conscious of the words we're saying, our actions, and our thought patterns, we can't change anything, right? So I was telling you how I had that crazy untamed mind and I was worrying about everything, like no exaggeration. I would get an email from my boss that might come in at like 6 o'clock at night saying, you know, can we have a meeting tomorrow? I would go to sleep in a panic. I would wake up the next day also in a panic and then drive to work thinking, I've lost my job, what am I going to do, da-da-da, la-la-la. I would create scenarios that never happened.
Yes.
And I would put myself in hell. And there's this beautiful quote by the Sufi poet Rumi who says, why do you...
Rumi.
Yeah, I love Rumi. Why do you
Rumi
put
Doomy.
yourself in jail when the door is open? And he's talking about the
Good
mind,
one, isn't it?
you know, and it's true.
See,
and my
I
life was jail.
I could sit in that for an hour. There's so much in that statement. I say it's just clouds in front of the sun. That's what my thing is.
I love
In my
that one.
mind, I just go, it's clouds, they will move on and the sun will always be shining.
Always.
That's my sort of
Yeah,
mantra.
it's beautiful.
Like, okay, you're just allowing the clouds to hover. But
Is it then
in
affirmation?
jail, but
Yes,
the door's
yeah, that's a
open.
God, it's
Oh
beautiful
my
to-
God. Oh my God.
So, Sarah, would you then say, with those sort of sayings, that having that mantra every morning for sort of people who say might be listening and going, I can't really have that thing to make it sort of shift?
So-
what sort of
So I give some
first
people
step?
some techniques, right, which is helpful. First thing is when you have a negative thought that comes up, then you can't do anything about it once it's there, but you can replace it with a more positive feeling thought. And I say to people, before these negative thoughts come up, have already in your mind something that brings you joy or love or happiness. It might be your best friend, your dog, your workplace, a holiday destination, whatever it is. Just know what it is. Then when the negative feeling thought comes up, replace it straight away. You might need to do this 60 to 70 times a day at first. But what we know now through neuroscience is for a long period of time, scientists thought that our brain was set by 30. By 30 years old, the brain is not going to change and good luck. Now we know through neuroplasticity that the brain is able to change till the day that we die, which gives us agency.
It's wonderful.
If
It's all
we-
hope, isn't
Huge
it?
potential
Exactly. That
for
we
everyone.
Never give
we
up.
know how
For
to,
all of you, there's potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we know how to use the mind properly, we're able to rewire it, right? So the more that you start moving from the negative thought to the more positive feeling thought, the more you're rewiring your brain to be more positive rather than negative. But as you say, it's a work in progress. We always have to be consciously aware and watching our mind. Another thing I say to people is if you get those ruminating thoughts that we all have had, 2:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, that wake you up, or you can't fall asleep because your mind's swirling, then test it. Test it. Do you know for sure about that thought? Like, for example, if you thought, Sally doesn't like me, do you know for sure that Sally doesn't like you? Usually 90% of the time we don't know for sure that Sally doesn't like us. So again, you've got agency because you've tested the thought. Then you look at the thought and say, am I able to do something about it? If I think that Sally doesn't like me, can I call her tomorrow? Can I send her an email? That may be possible. Again, you're giving yourself agency and control. If you know for sure that whatever you're thinking about is 100% true, then you go into the third step, which is radical acceptance. And you accept the fact that you can't change anything about this situation. And when you know that you've actually accepted something, it takes the power away from it, right? So then that gives people a few things. Move to the better feeling thought. If you have the ruminating thoughts, you test them. If you can action them, you do something about them. And if you can't, you go into that radical acceptance. And that's the first way to start kind of rewiring the mind.
So you go from ruminating to illuminating.
Yes, that's
Yay.
beautiful.
Oh my God, it just dropped. So that sounded like Joe Dispenza, who we met in Los Angeles.
Oh, did you
Nick.
meet him?
We went to the School of
We
Greatness
met Lewis
with Lewis
Howes.
Howes.
Went to one of his. Actually,
I saw you met Lewis on your
Yeah.
Instagram. I saw
actually,
that.
it's close
And
to
Joe-
your title, School of
Yeah.
Greatness.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
close.
And his event was sort of something like that, and that was great. But that was
We
all about
loved it, but
rewiring
we
the
loved
brain.
Joe and interviewing him. How was that, Joe Dispenza?
Yeah, I've interviewed him a couple of
Yeah.
times.
Oh,
yeah, it was
hello.
great.
Yes,
I've got to
exactly.
tell you a funny story about
We wanna hear
that.
about
I
them
love
all.
it. Yeah,
This
we
is-
do.
Love it, yeah.
Joe Dispenza was
Yeah.
the first person I ever interviewed for my podcast.
You're kidding?
I swear
That's a
on my
first-
life.
what a good first
You
get.
could have got John down the road. No,
know.
give Joe a call. You don't know Joe Dispenza, guys. Look him up. He's
So I
huge.
was quite nervous because it was the first interview I'd ever done.
Wow.
And then he came on, I think, the next year or something like that. But, he's wonderful, as a lot of them are.
Yes.
Nick and I were also chatting yesterday about someone like a Joe Dispenza, because listening to you, it sounded very Joe with the neuroplasticity.
Yes, yeah.
Nick and I were talking about, because Nick and I get so into our interviews that a lot of what they say washes over us in our our own lives.
Yeah.
With someone like a Joe, I mean, Dr. Andrew Huberman, there's thousands of them, Byron Katie, one of my favourites. Do you take a walk away with so much of that information that you're sharing? Do you digest that into or absorb it into your life?
So I think, and you probably the same, you take what lands with you. So sometimes I can interview with someone and maybe not much lands with me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Or there'll be things that I put into practice. And because I teach a lot of athletes and executives, I have worked out my own, what works for me, what strategies work specifically for others, and I teach them that. So I suppose, like anything, it's not, I wouldn't say that I would look at one person and take all their work or anything like that, but definitely components here and there. But really, like, when you think about it, they're all coming from biblical texts, some science, some neuroscience. Like, no one is like the first, So the more you add your own twist to it, the more that you see what works for you. Like, I remember
you integrate.
Exactly.
Yeah, this
exactly.
is wonderful.
And we quote people all the time.
We do a thing like we just were saying with say, Stephanie Lefevre. I don't know whether you know
I don't
her.
know
She's
her.
one. You'd love her. You have to
Unbelievable.
link it
I use
up.
it every day in my life.
I'll link you guys up.
Yep.
She's amazing, but she's very much of what you say to yourself, exactly what you're saying at the start, how you change that thing. And she says, like, there's affirmations every day. And it's so powerful. How often do we say it? Like,
I used her affirmation that I met my new partner.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, and again, that's from the offset of an interview with
Yeah,
someone.
because something
she
landed.
had a power.
Yeah.
Not a power of it. Her power empowered me.
Yes, yeah.
And I use.
And
how
when
often do we
and
quote
also
people?
not when you're also in a bad space too, in your good space too. It's like,
Yeah.
thank you. More, please.
Yeah.
Because I've always been into this my whole life. Since I was 15, I did a positive, thinking
I was
rally
drinking
when I was
lots
in
at 15.
America as an exchange
hair.
student. So I had a lot of
Yeah.
that from there. So I've had this in my belly my whole life, and I just like live and breathe this, and I sort of can't get enough. And as you say there, I'm students for life, and so it's forever learning. But Terry Cole reminds me very much of you a
You
bit.
know Terry Cole?
No, I see. I don't know her work.
Oh,
I've
okay.
seen what she
Another
looks like,
one.
but I don't know
She's
her.
our age group, and she was actually the same thing. She was a big, successful talent agent in the States, and the whole thing going, and wanted something else. And she ended up quitting that on a massive salary, and even her dad's going, what are you doing? And she's gone back to uni to study. She's now a psychotherapist, and she's just wonderful how she's changed. And she tells that story about meeting her husband too. She was sort of saying, because she said, I'm not going to be with anyone who hasn't done the work. And she's saying, I'm meaning 20 years of the work, because she's older. And she
so
did.
funny.
She actually did. A
Yeah.
girlfriend set her up,
Yeah.
and she goes on
And
a
we
date.
talk about these. That's
So
why I was
often.
asking. We talk about the people we interview a lot in our lives.
We use it in our lives.
And that's why with my God, the cachet of guests that you have had. And honestly, listeners, she's heading up to 500 of the most remarkable humans on this earth, as Nicola said in the intro. That's why I asked, little sort of gifts of wisdom has it landed in you?
Yeah. I think definitely some. There's so many that I can't even remember anymore.
No, I get that.
You know what I mean?
Can we say, do you have a favourite guest? Because we
I'm
sort of go,
scared
we
to
always,
ask that.
we always
Go,
go,
go.
it's like nearly having a
It's the
favourite
number
child.
one question people ask
I'm
me.
scared.
Yeah.
Because you can't say,
I
'cause
was like,
everyone,
I'm going to hide.
after we've done everyone, we go, that was the best one we've ever done. Next one.
And in the car, oh my God, it's true.
What
It's
about
so
you?
true.
Do you
I
have-
am the same.
Yeah.
And then I forget all of the others as well.
That's right.
And I'm like, but this was one of the best. And it wasn't, she's a thought leader in her own right. And I know you'll die when I tell you who
Oh
it
no,
was.
it's killing me.
Actually, Olivia Newton-John. I interviewed her a year before she passed away. She was in America.
Yeah.
And we spoke for an hour, and she hadn't really done long form kind of podcast interviews before. I don't think she really did any, after that. And she'd done TV and all that kind of stuff over the years. And because she's very spiritual and I'm very spiritual, she just allowed me to go there, right? And she looked wonderful at the time. She wasn't dying. And we talked about what she thinks would happen when she dies. And she told me a story about how when she had her daughter Chloe, she thought she was going to have a miscarriage. And she said to God, I will pray and say a special prayer every day if you allow Chloe to survive. It was the Lord's Prayer. Because she said to me, I say the Lord's Prayer every day because God allowed Chloe to survive. And, you know, she just told me stories of when her sister died and energies that came in the room. And it was unbelievable. And I remember thinking, like, this is just incredible. And she said at the end, and I'm not trying to big note myself, it's true. She goes,
Please do.
She goes, when they said it was an hour interview, I thought, oh, what am I going to talk to her for an hour? But you've pushed me to places I haven't been in such a long time. So thank you very much. And I remember when she died, and I wasn't like a super fan of Olivia Newton-John. I mean, I don't think there's one Aussie that did not love her. No. I was a friggin' mess. I remember getting ready and seeing it on my phone, the news that she had died, because she impacted me so greatly that I remember I got onto another interview and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, Olivia, he was American too. And I'm like, Olivia Newton-John's just died. And he's like, oh, do you need a moment? And I'm like, no, it's okay.
Can you give me a moment?
Wow.
Box breathing.
Yeah, seriously. So she was by far, I just will never forget.
Really intriguing.
I will never forget what we talked about, and she was so eloquent in the way that she spoke. Her way of thinking was very similar to mine in what her beliefs about the afterlife, and, you know, I hope...
And what are they? What are your beliefs about
and I really hope this to be true, and she got there in the end, that she could meet, because nearly everyone in her family has passed away. Her brother, I think her sister, maybe her brother's alive. There was everyone except for her. Yeah. And she said, I just hope to meet their spirits, that they're waiting for me, and I hope to meet them. So I hope that she did.
How joyous.
What a gift.
That's joyous.
Sarah, what an absolute gift for you. And I sort of think there's no coincidence.
No.
You got that time with her. Like, you know, special people didn't, and, you know, and that's why, you know, it happened too.
We just interviewed Toddy too, didn't
you haven't listened to that one with Toddy, who's a friend of
her
ours.
cousin or something, isn't it?
That's her niece.
Yeah, her niece.
Yeah, so it's her mum's
right.
daughter. And Olivia was ended up stepping up like her mother.
Yeah, they were very close.
So we did the thing. Actually, David the medium came with us too. So we did the charity walk with Chloe. So we hung out Chloe and Toddy, and that we're sort of big supporters of her foundation, and we want to thank our listeners for supporting us as well too for that. That sort of all the people, wowza.
But Toddy was very, very, very powerful too. There's obviously some spiritual lining.
She's very spiritual.
Obviously not Olivia, but Toddy really affected me in a huge way, that interview, because she went into the depths of her mum leaving when she was very young, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But Olivia, how she stepped in to have the motherly wall.
And Olivia actually helped. And for listeners, tune in, go back to Toddy Goldsmith on our one. It actually really was one of the most popular ones from last year, but also bringing that up with Olivia too, because when Toddy said she had this chronic illness for so long and she just tried everything, she couldn't do anything, and Olivia took her up. She went to Gaia and they had that time there, and you know what shifted it and what changed it forever? It was Olivia said she tried everything, Toddy.
Everything.
Surrender. The power of surrender.
See how that's dropped on you?
Yeah.
Yes,
like you were saying, a bit like radical acceptance, a bit when you've tried this, you've tried that, you can do no more. So then there's a time to go, you know what? Surrender to the universe.
It's a great word.
And it all changed. So that has one of the things that landed, I guess, on me.
When I started the podcast, I thought, I want to create a space where people can come and they can share their experiences and they feel safe. And I always loved interviewing, it's not like I interviewed my whole life. I love listening to people. And I was very curious about people's stories. So it was very natural to be able to be in that space. So I really do believe, okay, yes, the podcast has grown. It's got a great reputation now. But I honestly believe those people were attracted because of the space that was sacred that I created for them as well. I wasn't going to get PR headlines by asking like certain questions so they could get written up in the Daily Mail or something like that. I was going to respect their stories. You know, when Jada Pinkett Smith came on, She did one interview in Australia, and they called me from LA and they said, we have just chosen you. We have looked into everyone else and we don't feel comfortable. And we looked into you. And Jada's story, obviously, you know, her and Will had that breakup, or, you know, so there was a lot of talk around her and this book that had come out. And the fact, I remember sitting there thinking, wow, this is what I wanted, that people in LA were talking about my podcast and saying that's the one to go on.
Love it.
You know, and it's because
You're
I
very
treated
gentle.
her
You have
well.
a very gentle approach. No. It's to be admired. Just calm, and there is an energy around you. I also love your backdrop too. Is it stars?
Oh, yeah, the
or
stars,
something?
the stars.
I love the
It's just
stars.
Yeah.
And just your authenticity.
You are a star.
Just like, shines through like a
Yeah,
shining star
yeah,
too. It is.
yeah.
I think when
I mean
people
that.
are authentic and really are sort of wanting to know the essence of people, it shows.
Yeah,
So,
the genuine curiosity.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's a
what
great
have you
line.
learned about relationships? Because that seems to be the biggest sort of thing about relationships. Is
Well,
there
we
any
were just touching
standouts?
on that
We
earlier.
were just talking about it.
There's a
Yeah.
chapter in my book where I specifically talk about friendships, but we can make this just relationships in general, right? First thing is, I think it's hard when you're on the personal development journey of really getting into this sort of work or just having a lifetime of it, being with a partner that may not be into it. I would assume that would be hard. And that's why I see a lot of marriages fail if one gets into it and another one doesn't, or they kind of struggle because one person doesn't understand the other side as much.
Sometimes they're jealous too.
Yeah.
Which is an awful word, but it's a fact.
Yeah,
They're like,
absolutely.
oh, great. Well, you've done it. Well, how would I understand? I haven't.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Says a lot about them too, doesn't it?
Absolutely,
I guess, the insecurity. But,
100%.
yeah,
So
true.
that can be tricky. But when it comes to friendships, this is interesting, right? And it's something that I researched a lot and looked at a lot with my own life. I think from a young age we think, okay, my last name started with G, so therefore I'm going to be friends with all the G's because we sat next to each other for years and years at school, and that's my friends. And then you evolve realizing that maybe the people with the same letter of their last name don't need to be your best friends because you don't have that much else in common. I mean, maybe you do, maybe you don't. The thing is, when we evolve, when we change, sometimes we are a little bit different. And when we're different, we might not have the same values as we did prior. So when that happens, we need to look around and make sure, are these relationships serving me and am I serving them equally, right? Because there's one thing to say they're not serving me, but you also need to look at yourself and say, what do you put into it? But I really think it's something that you need to be careful about, because the circle that we're in, there's research that shows that 80% of what you do is going to be influenced by your circle. So say, for example, 80% of your circle bitches a lot or is overweight or divorced, then you know that you're probably going to head down that way too. So you want to be surrounding yourself with great people, people that inspire you, people that have your back in the good times and the bad times. And the good times is very interesting. Again, we did touch on this earlier. Because sometimes you find that it's hard for people to see your success, right? So it can be a mirror to them that they might not have achieved what they wanted to, and you see their feathers start getting ruffled, right? And that can also be a sign of maybe to step away, because you don't just want people who are there for the bad times, you want people there for the good times. And I remember when I got my book deal thinking to myself, oh, I'm really scared to tell one of my friends because I think that they're going to be upset because maybe it was something down the track that they wanted for themselves. And in reflection, that's a weird feeling to think that you can't talk to someone about a success in your life because you don't want to hurt their feelings. And it's those sort of things where I think we need to really cultivate a great inner circle, and the older we get, that circle can be very small, and
talk
that's
about that.
okay.
We do.
I mean, honestly, how much time do we have to have 10 best friends?
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
They're not going to be strong, in-depth friendships because you'd be on the phone doing that all day. To have one friendship is enough. If you're 2 or 3, you're really winning at life. But to have those friendships where we can be honest, honesty is like the number one thing, and that we can call them in the good times and the bad times. Like I called one of my best friends. We were laughing on the phone yesterday because we're very understand the PMS of our lives, right?
Yeah, I love
and
that.
And I called her completely irrational because I know she'll talk me off, you know. Oh, but, oh my
that's
God.
past for us,
you know,
Totally.
this
Seriously.
and this and this. And she's like, you know, I know that it's nearly your cycle and da-da-da. And maybe you're being a bit irrational. And I was like, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And I could be open with
true.
her,
It's been
knowing I was
true conversation.
being a nutter, but I could express like
Yep.
I realized
she gets you.
She gets me.
Yes.
And she's like, you know what? In 1 week time, you know, I'm going to be calling you with the exact same thing.
And she's
right?
not taking
Yes.
it personally,
No.
you know, because when you
No.
know friends so well.
Like
we
I
had
text
that-
Nicola this week
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
something.
she'd think,
I was like,
and I was a bit like,
rah.
I'll let that sit for a
And
while.
Nick-
Like, I know her so well.
Yes.
You know what I do at the end of the day is when she'll go, nah, whatever, and it's resolved, and I say, I love you, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like a river.
It is.
Sometimes there's a load of sticks or rocks or whatever will pile up, but it's like just remembering the water's always ever flowing,
And
right?
it's real, isn't it?
And
I think
you
if
know,
you
you
have
put
a
the
thing-
dams there, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a heavy concrete dam; it's dam of sticks and rocks that can be moved.
Beautiful.
And let the flow of water
Yeah.
continue. And I'm constantly that image with Nicola. I'm so blessed to have this woman who I
Vice
adore, and I call
versa.
my bosom buddy.
Vice
That we actually
versa.
work together.
I know.
Like I just go, and it's like
And we
blows
love
my
it.
mind constantly. And this week was a real, but it's how you overcome that.
Yeah. It was just a
It's
one.
the
It was a
secret,
one
isn't
thing
it?
there, but it
It's-
was a strong
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
And it
And
was.
you're
It's
true.
a good.
Yeah.
It's actually a
Saying
good
you're
thing.
girlfriend.
It's a good thing for us, so too, because you used to
healthy.
think, you know, you work and you friends for like 40 years and whatever. And I was even thinking, if we
You want a
haven't slapper. I was thinking, if
That
we
hurt.
don't ever have like an old bump in the road or a disagreement with something,
Boring.
it's really not
No, it's
real.
boring.
It's like in any marriage
Exactly.
Your
relationship.
girlfriend.
So, and the
Yeah.
good
I
thing
love
was
that.
because we know one another and you
Yeah.
know where intentions are, and we both just adore one another.
Yeah.
It's something we'll navigate this. So sometimes when you have some space, you're that there, or let this one
Yep.
go like that.
It's where
and
you
get
work
that,
through it.
and then you go through.
Yeah.
And it's actually, and we very good. The good thing is too, because we're so honest and real, we work through it very quickly.
Yes.
too.
Quickly.
Exactly.
I
You
think
know, we
that's
don't
time
do
in
that
the seat. I also want to talk about self-compassion.
Yeah.
Because that word surfaced from when you were talking then. And Nicola and I talk about that. We interviewed a woman called Kristen Neff. She's like world-renowned, all her papers on self-compassion. But it's, what does self-compassion mean to you?
I think we're really hard on ourselves, and I definitely can be hard on myself, and bringing the friendship bit
Yes,
back
yeah.
in. My friends will be like, can you see where you've come? Like how far you've come? And I'll be like, oh, but this is not where I want it, or this and this. And they're like, come on. And they kind of put you back into place. And I think that we expect so much from ourselves these days. And really, we're our own worst enemy in that sense. No one else gives a shit.
No.
You know,
Yes,
like they
true.
don't care where you're at.
It's true.
Or what
It's
you're
so
doing.
true.
It's you that cares about
Good
you
for everyone
so
to listen
much.
to that, because people worry sometimes, I think.
Really,
you know,
no one
yeah.
else worries about anything but themselves. You know, it's like that whole idea that people are saying things about you. No, they're not. They're just worried about themselves. They're not worried about you. And I think that we just need to take the time to care for ourselves, right? And have compassion and know that if we're doing the work, if we're watching our thoughts, taking time out to do meditation or something beautiful for ourselves, because I mean, for me, meditation is just the number one thing. And it was very life-changing when I started really learning it properly. And showing up as a kind person, then what more can we ask for? You know, I say
Kind to self,
I say
number
to
one.
some students sometimes if schools come and ask me to talk, and especially I've done it recently with a lot of Year 12s, I say, you know, just give it your best shot when you're going into exams, because if you give it your best shot, it doesn't matter what the outcome is because you've tried your best. If you don't try, then that's where things can get murky. And I believe that with self-compassion too. If you show up as the best version of you, then that's okay. And if we stuffed up, then we got tomorrow. And how lucky are we to have tomorrow? So I think self-compassion is something that we all need to do more, because if we don't love ourselves, then who will love us?
Wow, Oh, that's so true. Well, thank you for sharing that one as well.
That's
That is
unbelievable
That is
what
so
you
good.
just said.
You know what I was saying with interviewing them was sort of similar with
So
people who inspire, and we've had sort of some takeaways. Like we've learnt from a lot of people who we've interviewed. They started off. A lot of them have become successful. I found that is when they've hit a rock bottom in life, and then it's been like that transformation. Or they used to be people pleasers, then they've realised no. Do you have a theme with all the people that you've interviewed that there's been a sort of something that's changed them or something?
100%. Everyone's had a rock bottom.
Okay.
And the thing is, and I think
you're alone.
Your work and my work, we're trying to get to people before they have the rock bottom. Try and change so the rock bottom doesn't happen. But what I say is this: life is hard regardless of what you do, how much work you've done on yourself. It's life. Like, I truly believe, my way of thinking is that we're here to learn, right? We're on a journey, and we might go, once we leave, we go back and back and back. And every time it might be that this lifetime we came into was to be more compassionate, to find more love, whatever it is. For that to happen, we're going to be tested, right? Or come into situations that we see if we were able to achieve whatever it is. So life is going to have the bumps and it's going to have the rainbows. But when we get that inner world to one where it's stable, then life won't be as hard. So you could do all the work and have this huge thing that happens and it shakes you up. But if your inner world is tough and you've got it set, then it makes all the noise from the outer world a little bit easier to deal with, because there's always going to be noise going on and there are always going to be things that happen that are upsetting. It's life. So majority of people, I think nearly everyone has probably come in with some sort of like dark night of the soul, and they're sharing their experience to help others so they don't have to have a dark night of the soul. But we are in life and we can't control those external things.
You know, my new mantra is it's all about the inside out, not the outside in.
Yeah.
And I think people lose sight of that, because if I do this and I see these people and I go out and I do this and I work hard and whatever, it's out here. But it's so simple, isn't it? But it's hard to explain.
But that was my world when I got the radio job, the money and the glamorous, and I thought, oh God, that's what I wanted. And then I had it and I was miserable, so miserable.
Yeah. Now, how do you end your potties too with the question of what is
a life of greatness to you?
What is a life of greatness to you, Sarah?
A life of greatness to me is one of authenticity. I think showing up, being your most authentic self, it's important. A lot of research now shows that, if you're a chameleon or you feel like you're living life for other people, then you're not going to be as happy. Live the life that you want to live. Show up, be kind, and do something that gives back to people. Do something in your life that gives back. Be of service. I think there's a beautiful saying by a spiritual teacher called Ram Dass, who said, we're all here to walk each other home. And I truly believe that to be true.
Dear.
You bring me to tears. We haven't got Sarah to tears yet, though, have we?
No, okay. I'll have to throw her one. Yeah. What about if we talk about Johann Hari?
Oh, yes.
Tell us.
Can you tell the listeners that don't know who that is?
So Johann Hari is a journalist, and he's written multiple
you put me onto him,
New York Times best-selling books. His recent one is actually on Ozempic, because he himself is on Ozempic. So he has studied some very interesting different topics in life, but one of his biggest books is about being able to focus and the fact that we are not able to focus as a society, and that has a lot to do with devices and a whole lot of other factors. So Johann and I did a tour last year around Australia. I've had him, I think, 2 or 3 times on the podcast. So it was lovely doing that in front of a live audience.
Oh, good,
he also talks a lot about addiction. He talks about mental health, because he himself had a harder childhood and felt very depressed, and then found that when he went to the doctor, they prescribed him antidepressants before even really asking him about his background. And it got him to really realise about how a lot of people are on antidepressants, but the doctors haven't actually spoken to them about why this may have started, what was the situation. Nothing against antidepressants, lessons, but more is this a Band-Aid effect, like let's get into why you actually feel like this and what's
or
happening in your
referrals, 'cause
environment.
doctors don't have time.
Exactly.
Refer someone on. I
So
gather, yeah.
he did a lot of work into that, and he is so fascinating. So he can talk to a lot of different topics, like from Ozempic to, talking about mental health and addiction. And he's
Look him up, guys.
really
He's
look
on
him up.
Insta.
Yeah.
How incredible.
He's
And
very
we've got the
powerful.
book, which everyone, it's just a must read.
Living a Life of Greatness. Yeah.
And what else? What's next for you, Sarah?
Oh, my God.
If you can do any more, I don't
Scares
know.
me.
And your mum, how old are your children now?
So my kids are 10 and 12.
Oh,
I don't know how you do it all with
I
two
know.
kids.
I think
Is
they're
there
at that
anything-
age
Is it N
now.
for nanny or
I think
is
that's
it
a
No,
beautiful.
I don't have a nanny.
That is a beautiful age because they're real children. They're not
Yes.
like little toddlers. They're not
That's
teenage
true.
attitudes.
It's
quite
It's the
true.
best
Much
age.
easier.
too.
Does get easier, guys.
Because
I
they're
thought
not
every
the
age was the best
hardcore
age.
teenagers where their friends are the number one thing in their life.
Particularly when you can party with them. And
I know.
drink.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
So they're still, loving me and very much into my opinion and that, but they can do stuff for themselves, like they can make their breakfast and have a shower themselves and all that kind of jazz. So it is actually quite a good age, and very proud of me with the book, and they came to the live show. Probably went a lot
Wow.
over their head, but it was nice for them to see it. And I do work very hard, but I think I heard a mindset coach say this once, and I thought, God, this really resonates. Someone asked him, he was American, what is one of the worst things that we can do as a parent? And he said, not follow a dream. And my kids see me following my dreams. And what he meant was that if,
you're bringing me to tears. Hurry up, you
love
made me
this.
cry.
and I feel that,
both of us.
sometimes when I feel that I do work a lot and I'm not one of those parents that can go to every function at the school or whatever it is, they see me doing the work that gives back and it fulfills me. And because I'm fulfilled, that makes me a better mother.
Well, Sarah,
Got
we've
me
got our
that.
significant questions.
That
We
got me.
seriously could talk to you forever
could
and
talk
ever.
to you
ever.
forever
No,
as
no,
well.
no, no.
You
It's
know,
just like
really-
sitting opposite a girlfriend.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Exactly. We
yeah.
are friends.
Yeah.
I know,
like
we're
a-
So,
and we
guys,
met through mutual
her
friends. That's
podcast
good.
is
Do you want to shoot
remarkable.
first? Do?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do the simple,
few
easy peasy one. Sarah, what makes you happy?
I would have said years ago these like really big things. And I want to tell you, these probably short answers, but I do want to tell you this story because honestly it was life-changing. I say to people on my podcast, like, what's your greatest mystical experience? And they talk about this idea of like oneness and being at one with everything. About 3 weeks ago, I went to take my daughter to her singing class that she has with a teacher. And the teacher's super cool. She's new and she lets you sit in. They have a one-on-one session. And so
I'm
I
sure
was
she wants
sitting
to
in.
kill some of the parents. Oh, don't do that. She can't sing like that.
Yeah.
Do that,
What
no.
are you doing? Exactly. So I was sitting there and my daughter was singing a song that she'd been practicing with this lady, and the teacher is just beautiful human as well. And we talked earlier in the podcast about how we're all energy. No exaggeration. What makes me happy was this. I sat there and my daughter, 10, singing this song, and I thought, this is one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had in my life. I feel like I'm about to cry. I felt at one with that teacher, with my daughter, and this song that they were singing, and it was pure bliss. It was like something happened
got
and we
watery
all
eye.
just connected, and that's happiness. Like happiness doesn't need to be a new car or a big holiday. It was sitting with my daughter while she was having a lesson in singing. And it was one of the greatest moments probably of my life.
Well, you weren't on your phone, for example.
No,
right?
exactly.
You were totally
Yeah.
focused, totally present.
You know what? I so
Yeah.
get that, and it's so beautiful. Just sort of brings back to my daughter, who's now like 31. You might know Gabriella. When my mum was dying, and she was actually then in hospital at this stage, and Gabriella was a young girl, and went to visit her in the hospital, and sang this song to her nana. And I remember just there, and Mum just had the tears, and I had the tears, and Gabriella was just
was the
pure
song?
innocent and
God,
joy.
I
It
wanna
was a song
know.
she'd learned obviously at school, and
Gotta
she was at that
ask
young
her.
age, about the same sort of age at that stage, yeah. And I'll never ever forget it. And then Mum said, I think that's the biggest gift I've ever had. You know, so it was sort of kind of, you know, we were sort of saying like of happiness, of everything you can get, or you get someone a present, and it just sort of happened organically that those moments there,
They're
you know,
there if you're there to
Present.
be there.
If you're
it was,
present.
you know, and I'll never forget
Remember the
it,
word
you know,
present.
and it's 20 years ago now, you know,
It's
like,
so
you know, so it's
beautiful.
just a thing there of going, wow. Well, look, Sarah, if you could share a back fence with anybody on planet Earth, who would it be and why?
That's a
God.
really...
But the people you've met, look at me, I'm leaning in. Give me some
Maybe you
Maltesers.
get paid so many for all these different ones.
Seriously,
That's
it's killing
too.
me.
I know, and there's so many wonderful people. I mean, one person, I've had him on the podcast, and I just adore him, and I find him super interesting, is Andrew Huberman. I think that, like...
Dr.
He-
Andrew, for those that know. For the listeners that don't know him, I always try and reiterate.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
He's amazing.
Yeah, why
and
is that?
like has one of the biggest podcasts in the world.
Yes.
And no joke, what I love about him is if he doesn't know something about whatever it is he's talking about, which he knows most things, he would just research and research and research. And if we're sharing a back fence with someone, I just think he would be so interesting to be next door to. I love his habits. I think he's taught a lot of people about getting up early and getting sunlight and how important that is, you know, even if it's overcast. And I just think that he's made science a lot easier for people to be able to access and understand. And I think he's wonderful. I really enjoyed his company when he came on the podcast. He was a lovely person. And yeah, I think it would be a hoot being next door to
I'll tell you
him.
what, we're going to be there.
I
So we're going to
admire him.
gate crash that fence, that's for sure. We like to gate crash a few parties. You know,
We'll be
have
like
a few
through
parties
the
of our own.
leaves.
Well,
Here we
Sarah,
are.
you have just been pure joy. Honestly, you've sort of blown us away. Brought tears to both of our eyes.
I felt like the angels
there,
are
you know.
around.
Yeah,
I
I
do
do.
too.
This is kind of a special space.
Really
It is. It's
do.
and I hope everyone else there can sort of feel that and listen to that. And look, Sarah, you know, being a producer in Heavy Potty, we like to encourage people to share the episode, to rate it,
Share
to
the
review.
love.
Is that right? What's your tips on that? You know,
Oh,
like that. You know,
God,
like
you know what? I don't know. If you know any, tell me.
Well,
Yeah.
we like the reviews and some stars.
Yes.
And Di, but we
It's
asked Di
nice.
because Di asks, she's actually has her own thing and she gives the guests her own sort of stars rating. So what do you think for the one and only Sarah?
I think because Sarah's
Di?
almost up to 500 episodes, I think 500 out of 5.
I reckon that's a good one. Wow. Well,
That's a
thank
big
you everyone
tick.
for tuning in.
Yeah,
And we're
we'd
back in
love
your
to.
ears next week.
Love you.
Ciao, ciao.
Love you,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You guys are the best.
Take care. Ciao.
Ciao.